Excellent! I shall have Vitriol show you about the estate and introduce you to Alessa, my daughter, as well as Huron, the captain of my guards here at the estate. Vitriol will be your man should you need anything for the purposes of this contract. He is quite efficient at ensuring the needs of this household are met. Vitriol positively radiated pride at Lord Huraven's compliment. Now, I must return to my business. Drawing my personal ire was not the most intelligent idea for a group that wishes to stay in the shadows, and I am now investing my personal time and funds into seeing that this threat is quashed. Huraven managed to make quashed sound like throttled with my own bare hands. He stood up and said, "You have my thanks for accepting this contract. My family is important to me, and so I expect Alessa to be well taken care of." The threat of what would happen if Alessa were not well taken care of was left to the group's imagination. "Now, I bid you farewell until our next meeting." With that, Huraven offered a crisp, short bow and began walking towards the manor. The five of them stood up from the table, the mood much lighter now that the rather oppressive aura of Lord Huraven having vacated the area now that they were no longer under his scrutiny. Vitriol made his way to the group from where he had been waiting near Huraven's side. "I am pleased his lordship found you fit for the contract. Every day that Alessa is vulnerable wears at his conscience. If you are ready, please come with me and I shall introduce you to Huron and then to Alessa. Both should be in the manor proper, as I believe around now is when Alessa has her fencing lessons with Huron. Though why she insists on the lessons with her classes, I know not." Vitriol added the last bit, almost as if he were speaking to himself. Vitriol led the group into the manor from the garden area. The inside was just as lavish as the outside. Gold leaf was prominent on the wooden accent, and the floors were of smooth white stone. A crystal chandelier glowed softly with its own magical light, illuminating the large entryway. "This way, please." Vitriol indicated a hallway to their left, similarly decorated. There were many doors and openings in the hallway that Vitriol led them down. He stopped outside one door near the end of the hallway, from which the ringing of steel could be heard. Opening the door, he stepped inside, beckoning the group to enter. It was a slight squeeze for Freya, though she managed without much trouble. Inside the room were a man and a teenage girl looking to be around 15 or 16 years of age. The man, who must be Huron, was easily fending off a flurry of blows from the girl's rapier. The girl bore more than a passing resemblance to her father with her dark black hair and above-average height. They also had the same nose, Xander noticed. Alessa seemed frustrated with her inability to make a single strike on the man and eventually threw down her blade with a frustrated noise. "Ugh, when am I ever going to be able to hit you, Huron?" she said despairingly. "I keep telling you, Lady Alessa," Huron began, "you're quite good for someone without class skills related to weaponry, but against someone with a class like my own, you will always be at a disadvantage." Alessa made another frustrated noise and said, challengingly, "One day, I'll make you eat those words." Huron grinned and said, "I look forward to it, my lady. However, I suggest we break for the day." He looked in Vitriol and the group's direction. "It appears that your father has procured a team of mercenaries at last to be your guards. Perhaps you'll finally be allowed off the grounds of the estate now that you will have an escort. We should both make ourselves familiar with them." Vitriol took this opportunity to speak, saying, "Yes, his lordship has just entered these 5 mercenaries into the contract for the defense of Lady Alessa until such a time as the threat against the family is taken care of." He turned the mercenaries and said, "As you may have gathered, these 2 are Huron, the captain of the guards at the estate, and Lady Alessa, Lord Huraven's daughter." "Greetings," said Atrax formally. "Hello," said Graphus and Gabriel at the same time. Frezai simply offered a nod of her head. "Howdy," offered Xander. Freya rumbled a chuff in greeting, drawing a smile from Alessa, who was amused that even the cat had greeted her. "I think we shall get along splendidly," Alessa said. "Huron, I suppose you wish to speak with them?" "Indeed," Huron replied. "I need to provide them with a family crest as proof of their employment and ensure they are aware of their duties." Alessa nodded. "Of course. Well, I personally shall be taking a bath after working up a sweat like this." She turned to the mercenaries and said with some measure of excitement, "Come and find me when you're done, and we can begin planning my first outing in weeks. I've been feeling so cooped up with Father refusing to let me leave the grounds." She marched her way out of the room and vanished from sight. "Now let's have a look at you all," Huron said, pacing back and forth in front of the group. "All armed, 2 in plate, 1 in robes, and 2 in leather," he mused. "I'll wager you can handle an engagement afar or up close. That's good, because what we're concerned about is someone trying to snatch Our Lady Alessa up on the street to hold as ransom to leverage against Lord Haraven to stop his investigation. Is it not a better idea to just keep her on the grounds if it's such a concern?" Xander asked. It made sense to him. As much as Alessa might dislike it, it was significantly safer overall. Unfamiliar with the nobility, I see. On the face of things, you are right. It would be safer. However, there are appearances that must be kept up as nobility. Having to hide in one's own estate out of fear builds a reputation of weakness. It would put the social standing of the house back decades and require a significant amount of coin and concerted effort to reverse. Lady Alessa also chafes at confinement, to the point where we were beginning to fear she would attempt to sneak out. Thus, a middle ground is taken where Lady Alessa can be watched over by a professional mercenary team to be kept safe as she goes about her days and participates in activities. I see. Xander was shocked at the intricacy of noble life. It sounded unpleasant to have one's every action sized up and attributed to their reputation. You'll also oversee her security on the grounds of the estate. As such, you'll be expected to have at least one of you on guard even through the night. Take shifts if you need. But with the recent attempts at trespassing, which happened at night, of course, we are taking no chances. If you have any additional suggestions for security, please see me about implementing them. I understand that mercenaries sometimes have exotic methods at their disposal for the security of an area. Xander decided now would be a good time to pitch an idea he'd had thinking about area security. I actually have an idea for something we could implement. I'm not sure if anyone has told you our classes, but 2 of my classes are Artificer and Demolitionist. I'm fairly confident that I could create a device that would make a loud bang, nothing that would damage the area, of course, if anything draws too close to it. They could be placed along the borders of the property as well as places like the windows of Alessa's room. I admit I find the idea intriguing. If you can demonstrate a working prototype to me, then I will give my approval to place these devices, Huron said thoughtfully. If there is nothing left, I shall show you to the suite you shall be using while you stay with us. It's located only a few doors down from Lady Alessa's personal room for your convenience, and more importantly, a speedy response time. The guard captain paused for a moment, thinking. There is also a stable on the property capable of handling your companion there, he gestured to Freya, if you should find the need to utilize it. Simply ask any of the staff and they should be able to direct you to it. No one else seemed to have anything to add to the conversation, and so Huron led them out of the room, back through the hallway, and back to the entryway they had come in. They were led to a large and ornate staircase to the 2nd floor, and then up a smaller but just as ornate staircase to a 3rd floor. There, Huron showed them the suite they would be using, as well as indicating which door was Alessa's. I'll leave you to settle into the space, and I'll have someone fetch you once Lady Alessa is finished with her bath, he said, once he had completed guiding them. Ah, and here is the key to the suite I'd almost forgotten. There are several adjoined bedrooms you may use. With that, they were left alone in the manor. Just one key? Asked Xander. Looks that way, answered Atrax, who had taken the key from Huron. Well, let's get this door opened, and I'll make some copies for us. No need to bother our hosts for it, Xander said conspiratorially. Indeed, let's see our rooms for the next... however long, interjected Frazé. I hope they have baths, Gabrielle said wistfully. My hair could use a wash. Inside, the suite proved to be as lavish as every other area of the house had been. A full 6 bedrooms connected to a large main space that contained several tables, couches, and bookshelves. Another door led to a tiled room that contained a large copper tub and a screen to change behind. There was no cooking area, but Xander supposed that guests were likely not expected to cook for themselves in a place like this. He quickly duplicated the keys with some leftover brass in his inventory and distributed them amongst the team. Ah, now this is the life, Fraze sighed, sprawling out on one of the many couches in the main area. We should really take contracts like this more often. Say that again when it's your turn for night watch, Graphis. Or when our next protectee is hurling insults at you because your armor doesn't match the theme of the event they're going to. Alessa seems decent enough so far, but gods, I've had some people I've had second thoughts about actually protecting on bodyguard contracts. Graphis has a point, Atrax commented. We're going to be rubbing shoulders with a lot of people who are going to be looking down on us as little better than servants. All of you, try and keep it from getting under your skin. We don't want to cause any incidents. Well, so far this seems nice, Xander added. But I can see where Graphis is coming from. If the beds are as comfy as these couches are, I think I could get shouted at all day and no mind, decided Gabriel. So we're just hanging around until someone comes and fetches us? Aye, said Atrax. Who knows how long that will be? Between being a noble and a teenage girl, that bath could take the rest of the day for all I know. Make yourself comfortable. Say less, said Xander, who plopped down at a table as Freya claimed a large couch for herself. Say less? Asked Atrax. Oh, it's a phrase from my home, like it means something along the lines of agreement with an idea. Say less about the details and I'll still go along with it, I suppose. I've never actually had to explain it before, but I was just agreeing with you. Xander hadn't run into any confusion with his way of speaking yet, and so was surprised that this was what stumped someone. Huh, interesting. Say less. I think I like it, Atrax said. I guess I should get to work on this alarm as open my big mouth about, complained Xander. And so he did. Not eager to work with testing explosives indoors, especially in a room as lavish as this, he opted instead to test the mechanism he'd been thinking of with a light rune. He created a small tube, as that would be the shape that the final product should be, and inscribed a light rune near the tip. Between the light rune and the gathering arrays that would power it was an intelligence rune. Xander was slowly getting a feeling of how he could instruct the intelligence runes, and he was beginning to suspect a couple of things. One was that they, along with some of his other runes, gained a measure of additional power when he leveled, and that a cluster of intelligence runes could be used to hold a more complicated or specific instruction. So he created and linked 3 intelligence runes in sequence, creating a few rough if statements. The idea was that if that rune detected movement, and if it was within 10 feet, and if the source of the movement within 10 feet was from a being greater than roughly 30 pounds, then the light rune would activate. It took him about 7 tries before he got one that didn't power the light rune, or kept it powered the whole time. He estimated that it took about 2 minutes for the gathering arrays to collect enough mana to fully power the intelligence runes and allow them to interpret their instructions, which was nice. Otherwise, the device would go off as soon as it was created, making it useless. He placed the runed tube on the far side of the room. Hey, Gabriel, could you go walk towards that piece of metal I just set down? I want to make sure it's working. Gabriel looked at him uncertainly. Don't worry, it won't explode. All right, if you say so. As Gabriel approached the tube, the light rune at the tip lit up, the series of intelligence runes triggering properly, and passing the mana in the channel to the light rune as she came within 10 feet of it. Perfect! Xander cheered. Graphis, can I get you to do the same thing? I want to make sure it functions properly, even with, height variances. Yeah, I'm short. I know, I'm a dwarf. It's not exactly like we aren't all short, so it don't bother me none. Graphis grumbled, but also walked towards the tube. It worked just as well as it had with Gabriel. Thanks, Graphis. And thanks, Gabriel. I think I can make this work. I'll use a fire rune and a little bit of powder packed into the tube instead of a light, and it ought to make a loud enough noise for an alarm. Hopefully Huron will be willing to provide the metal for it, because I'm just about out of steel. That's a clever little invention there, Fraze commented. We should have you make some and put them out next time we're out on the road, too. Yeah, that would be a good idea, though I think we should still have a watch, Xander said. I don't know if there are skills that could bypass something like this. Probably, there's a skill for just about anything, Graphis added. I've even seen a few sneaky assassin types teleport short ranges, or at least move so fast they looked like it. Never did find out which one it was. Wow, that's kind of scary, Xander said. The thought of teleporting assassins made him realize something. Other than his mace and shield, he had little way of safely fighting someone in a crowded area. He couldn't exactly go about chucking grenades in the town, and even his guns were subject to hit anything downrange of him if he were to miss. He needed something to give him an edge in a melee fight. A creeping smile grew over his face as he considered the fact that he would be immune to a flashbang that he created, allowing him to detonate it on top of himself in a fight and disorient whoever he was fighting. The flash from his normal grenades was already quite impressive, and if he remembered correctly from the little he knew of explosives, it was the potassium chlorate that was the culprit. Perhaps he could create a compound with greater amounts of it and lesser amounts of the other explosive components to create a flash powder. Then he'd be able to create a thin metal container for the powder and detonate it with his rune work. The only thing that was stopping him right now was the space that would be required to test such a device, and the fact that going around testing explosives would probably terrify the staff of the estate. He'd have to ask if there was a place he could test his idea out when he demonstrated his alarm device to Huron. While he was pondering how he could go about creating flash powder, there was a knock on the door. Atrax stood up from his seat, hurried over, and opened the door. Outside was a staff member dressed like some kind of maid, Xander thought, who said, "Lady Alessa has finished with her bath and will see you now." "Ah, of course. We shall be there shortly," Atrax replied. Once the door was shut, he turned to the group and said, "Well, you heard her. Let's get up and get on the job." Fraze groaned. "But I'm so comfy," she whined. "Up, up, up," Graphus said to her, dragging her limp form from the couch as she bonelessly flopped onto the floor from the couch. "Fine," Fraze said, standing up from her prone position on the floor and dusting herself off. "But only because we're getting paid." The five of them, and Freya too, since Alessa had seemed amenable to the cat, made their way to the door that Huron had pointed out to them as Alessa's. Atrax rapped his knuckles on the door, calling out, "Lady Alessa? We were told you asked after us." "Ah, yes, come in, come in," Alessa's voice was heard through the door. As Atrax opened the door, she added, no longer muffled by the door, "And please, just Alessa. I get enough formality from everyone else in the house, thank you very much." "Right, Alessa then," Atrax replied, ushering the rest of the team inside the room before entering himself and closing the door. The room was even more lavish than the guest suite they were staying in. An archway in one direction led to what must have been a bedroom if the large four-poster bed was any indication. Another led to a balcony with glass doors, and a third to a combination of a bathroom and a closet. Wardrobes filling the room except for a tiled area that held a bath and changing screen similar to the one in the mercenary's own suit. The foyer of the room they stood in was larger than the one that led to the other rooms in their suite, and thus contained even more tables, couches, cushions, bookshelves, and curios. "Come, sit with me at one of the tables and we'll get to know one another," she said with a smile, and added slyly, "and get to planning our first excursion." So the group sat around a table and exchanged pleasantries with Alessa. They learned that she was a painter, astrologist, and a jurisconsult. Xander then learned that a jurisconsult had something to do with keeping up with laws. He thought of it as some version of a lawyer, definitely no classes that would lend themselves to defending oneself in combat. The painter class certainly explained the amount of painting that covered the walls, and he noticed an easel as well as brushes scattered in various places. The paintings often featured constellations, befitting an astrologist. Alessa had enthusiastically shown off the telescope she had near the balcony. Only Atrax and Gabriel showed any real interest in it, though. Once introductions were had, the real business began. So, now that I am no longer to be confined to the grounds of the estate, I am dying to get out and visit my friends, as well as make a few public appearances to cement the fact that the Haravan family is not afraid of these threats. I still don't know why Father is taking this so seriously. This isn't the first time the family has been threatened by criminals, and I doubt it will be the last. "I'm sure he's just being careful," offered Gabriel. "I suppose so," answered Alessa, "but it's still so boring not being able to go out. I was thinking that I could knock out seeing a few friends as well as a public appearance at the same by visiting one of the restaurants on the river. I've missed their seared fish. Alessa reveled in the thought of the fish for a moment before continuing. I think that if I send out the invites today, I should be able to arrange for the event to be 2 days from now. I will, of course, inform the restaurant that you'll be escorting me. I don't mean to offend, but, well, I'm not sure they'd let you in otherwise. Certainly not armed and armored as you are. 2 days should be fine, Atrax said. That gives us time to get the lay of the area around the restaurant as well as chart out a path there and back. Ideally, I'd like to take a different way back than there to help throw off a potential ambush. I suppose that could be arranged. It won't make much difference to me since I'll be riding in a carriage, quipped Alessa. Evening time, 2 days from now at the Golden Griffin, then. I shall inform you if the plans change, but I doubt they will. I swear Thea and Sela would never do anything but bury their heads in their books without me. That should be all for the day, so I'll let you be about your business. Of course. Atrax nodded respectfully to Alessa. Ah, as we are to be guarding you, would you be remiss if Graphus here were to stay with you? We shall be taking roughly 5-hour shifts to ensure that someone is by your side at all times, if that is acceptable to you. Oh, yes, of course. I'm sure between myself and my handmaids, I'm sure that he can find a suitable conversational partner. Alessa assented to the request. Graphus glared at Atrax for volunteering him for the first shift for a moment before settling into a neutral, professional expression. I'm sure I can, he said diplomatically. If you love engaging stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all the latest episodes from FY Stories.